So that was my first experience with wedding photography. It felt very I don't want to cast it in a negative light, but in my head, what I left wedding photography kasi for a few years. When I went to grad school, I realized maybe it's not for me because I actually do not enjoy how much artifice is involved in crafting wedding photographs. Maybe it's not for me. I don't think I'm the right person to do this kasi naano ako parang it rubs me the wrong way. Something about it is off. And then when in grad school I started to unpack it's because we end up having to align our images with a lot of these yung sinasabi ko na templates. Yung mga templates na yun come from very traditional, old-fashioned, conservative places na baka hindi lang na-verbalize ng mga tao, that people just kind of pass it along without thinking about what it means. Like, what does it mean to have to photograph the bride na laging kailangan her eyes are like pointing downward, her lashes are like fluttering, di ba? Very sorry to use this word, but this is the word that really I would use to describe, like very virginal yung dating nung photographing a bride versus a groom who's very like, this is my watch and these are my shoes and this is my wallet. It's very like, I'm so rich. Look at this woman I bought. Parang yung naging feeling ko lang after some time doing it that way, I felt very, I struggled a lot with that kind of image making. And to be clear, I guess I also want to state this up front as I discuss this. I don't think that anymore. And I've kind of come to terms with what it means that people that people want a certain kind of imagery that goes along with their weddings. It isn't simply everyone's a misogynist. That's not why people do it. There's a lot of social reasons for these choices, no? And that is something that I am trying to uncover with my research now. I returned to weddings in 2017 because I was able to shoot. Long story short, this is a really long story, but I was able to shoot a wedding where everything went wrong, basically. It was a shoot in Palawan. Nasa island kami. Tapos, bumagyo, so we weren't able to go to the island where the wedding was supposed to be. My backup photographer's plane crashed, like literally sumubsub sa runway. Yeah, it was. Can we swear, or is this like a clean pod? It was a fucking mess. Sobrang gulo. Pero ano pa rin, parang so everything that you would expect to go right in a conventional wedding went wrong. But my photos were the best that they've ever looked. Because I was so engaged and I was so excited by the fact na, parang pwede palang ganito. Like, everything can go wrong, pero basta masaya yung couple, parang okay pa rin. It's still a joyful thing. Like, all of these other things that we're doing are just nice to have. Pero, if you're working with the right couple, or if the attitude of people is in the right place, parang all of these disasters really nakaka-bad trip sila, but there's still a way to find joy in these situations. So for me, that's what ended up becoming my angle. I returned to wedding photography, kind of trying to attract couples like that parang, while they did want to have a nice wedding, parang medyo mas relaxed sila in terms of how it is portrayed or how it comes out in the images. Yun yung parang, I tried to market myself as that. Even if a lot of things go wrong, people still need to project or still have the desire to project yung that the day went well, that things were, that things were a certain way. So I say all these words without judgment, yung artifice or polish. These are not qualitatively bad. I don't think that people are fake and wrong or whatever, misogynistic for wanting these things. No. But I guess just to set the stage, no, Tony, that's my background. That's how I came into wedding photography and why I'm interested in it. No, because I did have to be in it for a while, then leave, then come back in a way that made sense to me in order to really figure out that there was as a photographer that I have kind of a different objective maybe than I used to, which was just to how can a client pay for my flight to Boracay? The answer was to shoot their wedding back then. But now it's more of, how can I be a part of this day and provide them with the kinds of images that are not only pleasing to them, like aesthetically or personally or whatever, but that they feel like they can share, that have a social function, and or that fulfill whatever social function wedding photographs are meant to fulfill. So yun, is that okay? Sorry if I went on for too long, pero
Okay
yun
lang,
yung
okay lang.
yun, that's where I'm coming from.
Interesting nga yan kasi I mean since we're in the
Mm.
business of setting foundation or at least laying down the foundations for the discussion. Kung tutusin, actually medyo malalim na rin nga yung napunta natin even with the foundations, no?
Mm.
It's actually interesting for
Yeah.
me kasi kadalasan people might have that idea that all we do as academics is to criticize. Some people would think na incompatible yung being aware of the images that you look at and then the images that you shoot. Meron ng may type may na parang may stereotype na rin academic na parang all we do is criticize and analyze, and it's all intellectual in the sense na in the real world put a teacher in the field hindi makakapag-shoot. And I think that your situation is you are from UP, you're teaching Viscom and fine arts, and yet you have a lot of insights on the practice of wedding photography aside from your academic background because you are shooting, you are a professional.
To be fair rin, Tony, I guess this is a tangent na rin, no, about pedagogy. Pero sa UP kasi mandated kami to practice. No, it's part of the mandate of the university that our professors are still engaged in the industries that they are part of. So gustuhin ko man na di na ako mag-shoot, di talaga pwede. I think the belief is that it's part of what makes you a good teacher is being plugged into the industry. So yun, gustuhin ko man di ako makaalis.
Yeah, parang it informs talaga the approach and also the content, the insights that we put into our classes. If we're practicing na.
Sure.
So prior ako, since you asked about my background din kanina, aside from corporate, that for some people might have been surprised na I am now doing gallery work when in fact I came from corporate. And then I told you kanina before we went online na actually prior to Canon, I was a product of the gallery system. I was from Silverland. So siguro to connect lang dun sa previous conversation natin. Yun lang siguro for those who will be listening to the podcast and for our live audiences. That's our background. So in a way hindi naman kami totally detached.
Yeah.
We're teachers kaya all we do is talk. It's not that. So we really came from from the practice.
Well, I also wanted to set the foundation for why I am interested in wedding photography at all, no? Parang hindi lang siya some passing interest na nakita ko lang sa Instagram, naisip ko siyang aralin. This actually comes from a very personal experience for me of being trained in wedding photography and doing all of these weddings. And then parang having an existential crisis about what I was shooting, no? Kasi particularly, ano rin eh, I don't like to make it about gender, but I cannot help it. Ano kasi siya eh, it cannot be dismissed, na especially at the time when I started shooting, sobrang bihira ng babaeng nag-shoot. I was very, I was one of the few at the time, no? Pero now there's definitely more, no? And as I do my research on wedding photography in the Philippines, I speak to a lot of female wedding photographers. Pero in the early 2010s, I couldn't name a studio that was headed by a woman. Like now you have like Jaja and so many, which is great. Kasi at least mas naging diverse yung perspectives. And I think that's really visible in how the aesthetics of wedding photography has shifted in the past maybe 10 years. But back then, I would say the gaze was primarily male. It was coming from, it was coming from a lot of men who were shaping the imagery in the industry. And I don't want to put any malice on them naman. I don't think these men were being rubbing their hands together and going like, I'm gonna make this woman look like a virgin, whatever. Although I must say, I did encounter some of that while shooting. Na ang instruction nila sa bride is, kunyari virgin ka pa, na parang ang sarap suntukin, di ba? I mean, I don't know. I see a laughing emoji in the crowd. Pero may mga ganun talaga, may mga bastos din. No? But I will say it's rare. It's rare for anyone out there that's like planning to get married. That's rare, and it didn't happen a lot, but it has happened around me that there are practitioners that will say rude things. But I think that a lot of the templates have been shaped by the patriarchal perspective that a lot of wedding imagery in general emerges from. You know, the fact na yung bride needs to look like a birthday present, di ba? Nakabalot siya, tapos pagdating niya dun sa groom, she's unwrapped. You know, all of these very subtle signifiers that come from a wedding tradition that might not reflect how people see themselves anymore, but that communicate to your society or to your community that you are getting married, right? And that's another thing that that comes up in my research a lot when I do reading about this. Pero yung fact kasi is wedding photography is both a personal practice and a public practice. So may personal function siya in the sense na it means to serve as a memory bank for the clients, right? They want to remember this day. It's very important. A marriage contract or the wedding ceremony is a public declaration of a personal commitment, di ba? So it needs to serve both of those functions. It needs to function personally. It needs to be a good reminder for the couple of what happened that day, but it also needs to signify publicly to your community that you got married. So and this needs to be visible in the images, right? So you need some signifiers there that communicate to everyone what's going on. So some of the ones that have stayed, no, I think less and less siya ngayon because people are starting to parang customize their symbols for their wedding day a little bit more. Pero things that are common are like the white dress. Diba? The white dress has stayed, even if it does not necessarily signify what it used to. It signifies now wedding. It signifies we're getting married. So a lot of women will still opt to wear a white dress, even if maybe they're not aware of what it used to mean or ano yung significance niya historically, or even if they're not super aligned with that. Pipiliin pa rin nilang mag-white para yung pictures nila, mukha silang kinakasal and people know that it happened. So yeah. So that I think that's an interesting interplay din to have to satisfy both a personal objective for your client and also a community or public one. That I think is the struggle that I was able to identify. Sorry, Tony. Sige, go lang.
I'm curious ako kasi, for example, you mentioned yung the term signifiers, no? I was thinking probably the wedding photography to a certain extent carries the same visual load or the same similar signifiers, even the signified has changed, because the marriage itself, the ritual itself, also normalizes certain roles and personalities and myths. You mentioned a while ago that the female in the couple would wear white, and if we look at it in the tradition of, let's say, at least let's say, for example, Judeo-Christian marriages, the white in the marriage ritual would usually have its own signifier and may personal dimension, and mayroon din siyang social and religious, no? So inisip ko baka part of it really is hindi mo siya talaga, medyo hirap siyang i-divorce. Ang interesting din ng term, no? Ang hirap i-divorce, even the language that we have in a discussion. Yung the aesthetics and the myths that you create in wedding photography, because the ritual itself stands for the same. It normalizes.